They came carrying ghosts. The Portuguese bore the shadow of Cristóvão da Gama, their slain captain. The Muslims bore the long weight of victory and vengeance under Imam Ahmad, the man called Gran. Between them stood the ridges of Wayna Daga, where stone, smoke, and prayer would decide the Horn of Africa. On this highland morning, the air was not still. It was waiting for a single shot, a single cry that would echo far beyond Abyssinia. For one side, the chance to avenge a martyr. For the other, the burden of defending faith. The highlands held their breath. In Lisbon, the death of Cristóvão da Gama would later be painted as the fall of a saintly knight. But in Abyssinia, his survivors carried wounds deeper than flesh. Many wore his blood on their tunics as a mark of devotion, refusing to wash it off. Galaudeos, while rallying the nobles, allowed Portuguese veterans to sit at his side in the war council, granting them honor equal to his lord's. The Jesuits urged them to record every detail of Cristóvão's final moments, knowing that Rome would immortalize him as a soldier of the cross. Around their fires, the Portuguese spoke of him as though he still marched with them, whispering his name before each prayer. Their grief became a weapon, sharpening their will for the clash to come. The Imam's caravan stretched thin as it pushed north, but within it walked the soul of a nation. Women followed carrying bundles of food. Children clung to fathers who refused to leave them behind, and elders shuffled with staff, blessing the soldiers with trembling hands. Ahmad insisted they travel with the army, declaring that war could not only be destruction, it must also be protection. His commanders worried it slowed their pace, yet none disobeyed. At night, when silence settled, storytellers recited the lives of martyrs who had fallen in earlier battles. The Imam listened quietly, knowing that his own story was still unfinished, yet feeling in his bones that the last chapter was near. The boy who once fled through mountains now stood as a king, molded by exile. When Galaudeos addressed his warriors, he raised not only his sword, but also the tattered cloak he had worn during his flight years before. It was a symbol of humiliation turned into strength. His nobles cheered not merely for a king, but for one of their own who had shared their suffering. Priests placed his brow beneath incense smoke, blessing him with the mantle of David reborn. And when the Portuguese musketeers marched before him, their boots striking the earth in unison, the Highland soldiers believed they were seeing angels clad in steel. Galaudeos's voice carried over the camp. For faith, for land, for the blood that cries out from the soil. The land seemed cursed as the two armies drew nearer. Villages lay empty, doors swinging on broken hinges, wells poisoned, and fields of grain left to rot. Mothers carried infants into caves, while old men leaned on sticks, watching smoke trails rise from a distance, knowing war was stalking them once more. Scouts from both sides darted through gullies like shadows, leaving behind only whispers and broken arrows. For Ahmad's soldiers, each step northward felt heavier, their rations thin, their matches growing damp from the mist of Lake Tana. Still, they marched, their faith binding them like chains of iron. For Galordiwos, every valley they crossed echoed with songs of vengeance. Abyssinian levies struck shields in rhythm. Priests walked among them burning incense, filling the air with the scent of frankincense and ash. Wayna Daga itself loomed like a set of broken teeth against the horizon. Jagged ridges, narrow passes, valleys where an army could vanish in minutes. Men whispered of omens, strange lights dancing on the water, eagles circling the battlefield as if they too awaited the feast. By the time the two hosts glimpsed each other's banners, silence fell. The green of the crescent, the red of the cross. The stage was set. The silence shattered with horns. Abyssinian trumpets blared, low and mournful, answered by Ottoman cannon belching fire. The first volleys cracked like thunder, rolling across the ridges. Smoke swallowed the field, and the stench of sulfur stung every throat. Men charged into a haze where friend and foe blurred. Somali horsemen swept wide, hooves pounding like drums, their spears flashing in arcs of steel. Portuguese musketeers met them in iron squares, the volleys cutting riders from saddles mid-gallop. Bodies tumbled into the mud, horses shrieking in terror as they fell. Still, wave after wave pressed forward, driven by chants of Allahu Akbar from the Brothers of the Sword. The brothers hurled themselves into the wall of pikes, blades hacking with desperate fury. For a moment, they broke through, scattering musketeers in panic, their curved swords glinting in the smoke. But discipline pulled the Portuguese lines back together like jaws of iron. Muskets fired at near point-blank range. The brothers fell one after another, their blood steaming against cold earth. Above them all, arrows rained down in black swarms. Spears splintered, shields cracked, and men stumbled over the fallen. The ridges echoed like drums of war, as though the mountains themselves bore witness. To the soldiers locked in the frenzy, the world had shrunk to a blur of cries, sparks, and steel. They no longer fought for ground. They fought simply to endure. The highlands of Wayna Daga had become a furnace of smoke and thunder. Horns and cannons, muskets and blades all collided until sound itself felt like a weapon. Hours passed, yet neither side yielded. The Portuguese squares held firm, their volleys cracking with grim discipline. Imam Ahmad's cavalry thundered again and again, breaking lines but never breaking resolve. The Brothers of the Sword bled freely, carving paths through pikes only to vanish in volleys of iron. By midday, the ridges were slick with blood, the valleys choked with the cries of the dying. Men fought not for ground, but for breath, for faith, for the chance to see another heartbeat. From the ridges, Bati del Wambara watched with steady eyes, her prayers carried on the wind, her silence heavy as steel. The battle swayed like a rope, pulled between two titans, each moment threatening to snap. The sky darkened, rain began to fall, and the highlands seemed to tremble under the weight of fate. Both armies still stood, but each knew that before the sun set, the day would claim a king, a faith, a destiny. The storm of Wayna Daga was not finished. The day was still young, and death had not yet chosen its greatest prize.